I still remember the weight of that afternoon sunlight pressing against my back as I stood outside the glass doors of the restaurant. It was one of those crisp fall days in Boston, when the air carries the faint smell of roasted chestnuts and ambition, and everyone seems to walk a little faster, talk a little louder, like they're chasing something invisible. I wasn't chasing anything that day. I was just trying to treat myself to lunch, something simple, something human. After a long week at the small thrift store I ran downtown. My name's Monica James. I'm 52, and for most of my life, I've been invisible to the kind of people who believe money buys dignity. I wasn't always poor, but life has a cruel way of humbling you when you least expect it. My husband, Henry, used to say that dignity comes from the way you stand, not from the brand of your shoes. He died 8 years ago. A car accident, rain, a driver texting on the highway. And since then, I've been learning day by day how to stand without him. That day, I had on my best outfit, a cream-colored coat I'd found at an estate sale, pressed slacks, and a silk scarf that still smelled faintly of someone else's perfume. I remember checking my reflection in a restaurant's window, a mix of confidence and self-doubt staring back at me. Inside, I could see women in tailored blazers, men in polished shoes, waiters gliding like dancers between tables of laughter and sparkling glasses. It looked like a scene from another life. But I'd made up my mind. I'd saved enough for this meal, and I wasn't going to let insecurity hold me back. The hostess looked at me with that polite smile that isn't really a smile. She was young, no older than 25, her hair slicked back, her lips the color of old wine. "Do you have a reservation, ma'am?" she asked. "No, I don't," I said. "But I'm fine waiting." "It's just me." Her eyes flicked down, to my shoes, to my thrift store purse, to the way I hesitated when I said, "just me." That was the first moment I felt it, the quiet sting of judgment. She nodded mechanically, scribbled something on a clipboard and disappeared. I waited by the entrance, pretending to admire the chandelier while couples who came in after me were seated right away. After 15 minutes, I approached her again. "Excuse me," I said softly. "Has a table opened up yet?" She looked up, annoyed, then gestured vaguely toward the back. "Actually, ma'am, our tables are reserved for guests who meet our dining policy. This establishment maintains a certain dress code, and—" She didn't finish. She didn't have to. The words hung in the air like poison. I looked down at myself, my clean clothes, my polished but scuffed shoes, and for a split second I wanted to apologize for existing, but something inside me hardened. "I understand," I said, forcing a smile. "Thank you." I turned and walked out. The world outside was colder now. I sat on a nearby bench watching people walk in and out of that restaurant like they belonged there. My chest ached with humiliation, not because I was denied a table, but because I let that young woman make me feel like I didn't deserve to eat there. That kind of shame isn't new to me. It's something I've carried since childhood. Growing up the youngest of 4 in a working-class home, where hand-me-downs were blessings and dinners sometimes meant pancakes for dinner. My parents taught us pride. But pride and poverty rarely shake hands politely. I remembered being 13, walking into a fancy boutique with my mother to look for a dress for my school dance. The saleswoman had said, "Sweetheart, maybe you'd be more comfortable at the discount store down the street." My mother's face flushed deep red. She smiled politely, took my hand, and walked out. But when we got home, she cried quietly in the kitchen, whispering, "They don't get to tell us what comfort looks like." That memory echoed as I sat there, 52 years old, humiliated by another woman's smile. Only this time, I wasn't going to walk home and cry in my kitchen. I decided to do something I'd never done before. I stood, smoothed my coat, and walked 2 blocks down to the old thrift store I managed. My assistant Carla looked up from the counter. "Monica, you okay?" I nodded, but my voice trembled as I asked, "Can you close up early today? I need to run an errand." She smiled kindly. Of course, boss. I went straight to the bank. For months, I'd been saving quietly, every extra dollar from the shop, every tip from styling jobs I took on the side. I had been planning to use that money for something else, maybe to fix the roof, or maybe just to keep for emergencies. But right then, it felt like an emergency of another kind. The next day, I called the restaurant. My voice was calm, professional. "Hello, I'm calling on behalf of a client who wishes to host a private dinner at your establishment this weekend," I said. I gave them my maiden name, Monica Turner, and requested their largest private dining room. They were thrilled, of course. "Certainly, Miss Turner. How many guests should we expect?" 100, I said, "and I'll be covering the full cost in advance." There was a pause on the line, followed by a suddenly warmer tone. "Of course, Miss Turner. We'd be honored." I spent that week making calls, inviting everyone who had ever been treated like they didn't belong. My old coworkers, my customers from the thrift store, the janitor from the library who always ate alone in the park, the single mothers from my church, people who had stories behind their wrinkles, who had learned to laugh despite being overlooked. Saturday evening came, and the restaurant glittered under golden light. I arrived early, dressed in a simple black gown and pearl earrings, both thrifted, both perfect. The same hostess stood by the door, and I recognized her instantly. She didn't recognize me at first. "Good evening," she greeted with practiced politeness. "Good evening," I replied with a calm smile. "I'm Monica Turner. I reserved the private dining hall." Her eyes widened slightly. "Of course!" "Right this way, Miss Turner." The irony tasted sweet. She led me to the grand room where tables were set with crystal glasses and silver cutlery. Slowly, my guests began to arrive, one by one, then in waves. They wore their best, which wasn't always fancy but was full of heart. Laughter filled the air, mingling with the soft music from the string quartet I'd hired. As the evening went on, I caught glimpses of the restaurant's regular clientele, the ones who had sneered the day before, staring through the glass wall, confused at this sea of unfamiliar faces. The hostess and her manager whispered at the counter, occasionally glancing my way. I didn't need revenge. I just wanted them to witness what dignity looked like when it didn't need validation. Halfway through dinner, the restaurant manager approached me. "Miss Turner," he said carefully, "we wanted to express our gratitude for your generosity tonight. Your party has been delightful." I smiled, my voice soft but steady. "Thank you. I just wanted everyone here to know what it feels like to be treated with respect. Something I was denied here not too long ago." His expression faltered. The hostess standing behind him froze. She remembered. I saw it in her eyes. That flash of recognition and guilt that always comes too late. I turned to my guests and raised my glass. "To those who've ever been told they weren't enough," I said. "You are. You always have been. Don't ever let anyone make you forget it." The room erupted in applause, laughter, tears. I caught the hostess's reflection in the glass, her eyes glistening as she turned away. Later that night, after everyone had eaten their fill and left with smiles that could light up the street, I stayed behind to settle the final bill. The total was breathtakingly high, a number that could have scared me once, but I signed the check without hesitation. The manager thanked me profusely. "You've made quite an impression tonight," he said. I met his gaze. "I hope so," I replied quietly. "Because the last time I stood here, one of your staff made quite an impression on me, too." He looked uncomfortable. "I'm very sorry to hear that, Ms. Turner." "I assure you, we'll handle it internally." I nodded. "I don't need an apology," I said. "I just needed to remind myself and her that kindness costs nothing, but cruelty always collects its debt eventually." When I walked out of that restaurant, the same sunlight that had once exposed my shame now kissed my face like redemption. The air was cool, the night clear, and for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar. Peace. I didn't seek revenge that night. What I found was something much better. I found the version of myself who no longer needed permission to exist among the fancy. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of old coffee and sunlight streaking through the half-open blinds of my small apartment. The night before replayed in my mind like a dream, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the look on that hostess's face when she realized who I was. For once, the ghosts of humiliation didn't wake me. They were quiet, replaced by something softer. Still, beneath the satisfaction, there was something else, a deep ache that no amount of triumph could erase. It wasn't just about a restaurant or one rude hostess. It was about a lifetime of being told I didn't belong. That dinner wasn't revenge. It was a declaration, a reminder to myself that I was still here, still standing, still worthy. I walked into the kitchen, poured the last of the coffee into a chipped mug, and sat at the window, watching the city come alive. Cars honked, pigeons squabbled over crumbs, and for a moment, I wondered what my husband Henry would have said about last night. He used to tell me that kindness can be louder than anger if you know how to wield it. Maybe, in some way, he'd been right. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello? Miss Turner?" a woman's voice said hesitantly. "This is, Stephanie. I work at, I was the hostess last week at—" I didn't say anything. I just let her talk. "I just wanted to apologize," she said quickly, her voice shaking. "What I did was wrong. I judged you and I shouldn't have. It's been bothering me ever since that night." "You didn't deserve that." I was silent for a long time. Then I said quietly, "Why are you really calling, Stephanie?" She exhaled. "Because I saw how everyone looked at you that night. I saw how they respected you, and it made me realize I've been treating people the way I'm afraid the world will treat me. Like I'm not enough either." Her honesty hit me harder than I expected. I didn't feel angry anymore, just sad. Sad for her, for me, for every woman who's ever mistaken cruelty for protection. "I accept your apology," I said softly, "but don't apologize to me with words. Do better next time someone walks through that door." "I will," she said. "I promise." We hung up, and I stared out the window, the city glowing gold in the afternoon light. Something shifted inside me. I realized I'd been holding on to resentment for years, not just toward strangers, but toward myself. Toward the version of me that once accepted scraps of kindness as if they were gifts. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected began to happen. My thrift store, Second Chances, started seeing more foot traffic than ever. People from that dinner night stopped by, some just to talk, others to donate clothes or volunteer. A few even left notes on the counter. "Thank you for making me feel seen." Word spread. A local blogger wrote about the woman who paid for an entire restaurant to remind people of dignity. The story went viral before I even realized it. Reporters came by, cameras flashing, microphones out. They called me the woman who turned humiliation into hope. At first, I hated the attention. I wasn't a hero. I was just a woman who got tired of swallowing shame. But as I listened to people's stories, stories of discrimination, of invisibility, of rejection, I understood why my story mattered. It wasn't about money or revenge. It was about reclaiming self-worth. Then, one afternoon, as I was arranging a rack of donated coats, a familiar voice called from the door. "Monica?" I turned and froze. It was Lydia, my sister. I hadn't seen her in almost 15 years. She looked expensive. Tailored coat, designer bag, diamond watch. She always had a way of wearing confidence like perfume. You could smell it before she even spoke. "I saw you on the news," she said, her smile tight. I couldn't believe it. "You actually pulled something like that off." I wasn't sure whether it was admiration or disbelief in her tone. Probably both. "Yeah," I said, crossing my arms. "Guess I did." She glanced around the store, her eyes scanning the racks. Still running this little charity thing, huh? It's a thrift store, Lydia, I said. And yes, it's doing well. She gave a short laugh. Well, I suppose it suits you. You always did have a thing for other people's leftovers. That one stung, though I didn't let it show. Lydia had always been the golden child, the one who got the scholarship, the one who married rich, the one who never called unless she needed to brag. When our parents passed away, she inherited most of their savings. I never questioned it back then. I was too busy trying to keep my head above water after Henry died. But now, standing there, I saw her differently. Her eyes darted nervously. Her smile faltered when I didn't flinch. For the first time I realized Lydia's confidence was armor, not strength. "What do you want, Lydia?" I asked gently. She sighed, pretending offense. "Can't I visit my sister?" "You could've. Any time in the last 15 years, I said. "So why now?" She looked away, then finally said, "I need your help." That was new. Lydia, asking me for help? I leaned on the counter. "Go on." She took a deep breath. "Greg, my husband, he's leaving me. He's freezing our accounts, cutting me off from everything. The house, the car, everything's in his name." I didn't say anything. I just watched her twist her diamond ring nervously. "I thought maybe you'd let me stay with you for a bit," she said, her voice small now. "Just until I figure things out." I should have laughed. The irony was too rich. The same sister who once told me I settled too low now wanted to sleep on my thrift store couch. Part of me wanted to say no, to remind her of every insult, every time she made me feel like less. But then I saw the faint tremble in her hands, the tired lines around her eyes. Lydia wasn't untouchable anymore. Life had humbled her, too. "All right," I said quietly. "You can stay." But only for a while. Her relief was immediate. "Thank you, Monica. I really appreciate it." For the first time in years, Lydia and I shared a roof. It was strange. Two women who had grown apart living together again like strangers who shared a past but not a present. At first, she tried to maintain her superiority, talking about when I had my driver or how the Hamptons house looked in summer. But as the days passed, the stories dried up. Reality was creeping in. One evening, I came home from the store to find her sitting at the table, staring at the news article framed on the wall. The one about the restaurant. "You really did all this, didn't you?" she said softly. "I did," I replied, setting down my bag. She hesitated. "I used to think you were foolish, you know, that you wasted your potential running this store. But now," her voice trailed off, "now I think you might be the strongest one of us all." It was the first compliment I'd heard from her since we were teenagers. I smiled faintly. We've both survived in our own ways. For a moment, there was silence. Then she asked, "Do you ever forgive people who hurt you?" I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, I didn't see the sister who had belittled me. I saw a woman afraid of being forgotten. "I try," I said, "but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means letting go so you can breathe again." She nodded slowly, tears glinting in her eyes. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Neither did I said softly, "but I got it anyway." That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something beautiful and cruel about life. Sometimes karma doesn't come with thunder. Sometimes it arrives quietly, wearing your sister's perfume, asking for a place to sleep. Over the next few weeks, Lydia began helping out at the store. She greeted customers, sorted donations, and even started chatting with the people she once would have ignored. Slowly, her sharpness softened. She wasn't the rich sister anymore. She was just Lydia, human, humbled, and healing. But peace doesn't stay unchallenged for long. One rainy Friday evening, a delivery man dropped off a thick envelope addressed to me. Inside was a legal notice. The restaurant I'd rented was suing me. They claimed damages, false representation, breach of contract. I felt the blood drain from my face. How could this be? I'd paid in full, followed every rule. Then I saw the signature at the bottom. Gregory Wilkins, co-owner of the restaurant, my sister's husband. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The rain outside blurred against the window, smearing the city lights into trembling streaks of color. I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope spread open before me, my hands trembling. Greg's name glared from the letterhead like a ghost from the past. The same man who had made my sister's life look like a magazine spread was now coming after mine. I turned the paper over again and again, as if maybe if I stared long enough it would change its meaning. But it didn't. The restaurant, his restaurant, was demanding compensation for loss of exclusive clientele reputation, whatever that meant. It was absurd. I hadn't broken anything, stolen anything, or even raised my voice that night. I had simply paid for a meal and dared to exist with dignity. But to men like Greg, women like me were meant to stay in our place, quiet, grateful, unseen. I folded the paper neatly, stood, and walked to Lydia's room. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, brushing her hair. When she saw my face, she froze. "What's wrong?" I handed her the notice. Her hand trembled as she read. "Oh my God," she whispered. He couldn't. Her voice cracked. "Monica, I swear I didn't know." I stared at her, my voice quiet but steady. Didn't know? Or didn't want to? She set the letter down and buried her face in her hands. "Greg's been bitter ever since you went viral. The restaurant's revenue dipped. Some investors pulled out. He said you made him look like a fool, that his place turned into a circus of social justice." I wanted to scream. He humiliated me first, and now he's punishing me for surviving it? Tears streamed down her face. "I'm so sorry, Monica." I left him because I couldn't take that arrogance anymore. He thought the world revolved around people like him, but I never thought he'd drag you into this. Her voice broke, and for a moment I saw not my cruel, condescending sister, but a woman who had finally run out of places to hide. "We'll fight this," I said quietly. "I won't let him win again." Over the next week, my small apartment turned into a war room. I gathered receipts, contracts, bank statements, anything that proved I'd paid everything legitimately. Lydia helped, her guilt turning into determination. She reached out to a lawyer friend, a woman named Sandra Price, who agreed to meet us for coffee to discuss the case. Sandra was sharp, the kind of woman whose eyes miss nothing. After reviewing the documents, she leaned back and said, "They don't have a case, Monica. This is intimidation, plain and simple, but men like Greg count on fear doing half their work. Don't give him that satisfaction." Her words steadied me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong. When the court date arrived, Lydia insisted on coming with me. She wore a simple navy dress, nothing like her usual designer outfits, and held my hand the entire walk into the courthouse. Greg was already there, flanked by his lawyer and that smug air of entitlement he wore so easily. When he saw us, he smirked. "Well, isn't this sweet? The charity queen and the runaway wife. What a reunion." Lydia's grip on my hand tightened. I wanted to tell her to let it go, but before I could, she stepped forward. "You used to think I'd never stand against you," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "But you're wrong, Greg. You've humiliated enough people for one lifetime." The hearing was brief but brutal. Greg's lawyer accused me of exploiting the restaurant's image for personal gain. Sandra dismantled every argument with precision. She presented bank receipts, signed contracts, and even witness statements from staff who confirmed the event was conducted respectfully and without incident. Then came the part I hadn't expected, the restaurant's internal emails. One of the former servers, a young man named Daniel, had sent them to Sandra anonymously. The email showed Greg's true intent, his fury that some thrift store woman turned our brand into a charity parade. When Sandra read those words aloud, the courtroom fell silent. Greg's face turned red, his jaw tightening. Lydia looked down, ashamed. The judge didn't take long. The case was dismissed. Greg was ordered to pay my legal fees and issue a public apology, but justice isn't always satisfying. As we walked out, Greg followed us into the hallway, his voice low and venomous. "You think this makes you special, Monica? You embarrassed me. You'll regret it." I turned, meeting his gaze with calm that surprised even me. "The only thing I regret," I said, "is that you still think decency is a weakness. You should have learned by now. The world's changing. Even people like me get heard," he sneered. But there was something else in his eyes. Fear. That night, back home, Lydia cried. She apologized again for everything, for the years she'd looked down on me, for marrying a man like him, for not seeing my worth sooner. I didn't tell her it was okay. I just told her it was over. After that, something shifted between us. We weren't the same kind of sisters anymore. We were two women scarred by pride and pain, slowly rebuilding something fragile but real. The following month, I hosted another dinner. Not at that restaurant, of course. This time, it was at a community center. No chandeliers, no crystal, no dress code. Just long wooden tables, home-cooked food, and laughter that felt like music. Lydia helped serve plates. Sandra came too. Even Stephanie, the hostess, showed up, this time as a volunteer. We called it the Dignity Dinner. What began as a single act of defiance became a movement. People started donating. Not money, but meals, clothes, and time. We partnered with local shelters, churches, schools. Every month, we hosted dinners for people who had been made to feel small. And every month, more people showed up, not out of pity, but to celebrate resilience. One evening, as I was cleaning up after one of those dinners, Lydia walked over, holding a letter. "You should see this," she said, smiling through tears. It was from a woman in Ohio. She'd read about the Dignity Dinner online. She wrote, "Your story reminded me that it's never too late to walk into a room like you belong there. Thank you for showing women like me that grace can be louder than anger." I folded the letter carefully, my throat tightening. That was the moment I realized this was bigger than me, bigger than a restaurant, bigger than revenge. It was a reclamation of something I'd lost long ago. My voice. Months passed and the dinners kept growing. Sometimes I'd look around and see faces glowing with laughter, and I'd think of that girl who once stood trembling outside a restaurant door, too afraid to ask for a table. She would have never believed this life was waiting for her on the other side of humiliation. And yet, it was. Still, life doesn't wrap up neatly. One winter night, after a long event, I found Lydia sitting alone, staring at her phone. "It's Greg," she said. "He's sick. Cancer. He wants to talk to me." I sat beside her quietly. "Do you want to?" She hesitated. "Part of me does. Part of me doesn't want to give him that satisfaction." "Then don't do it for him," I said softly. "Do it for you, so you don't carry that anger forever." A week later, she visited him in the hospital. When she came back, her face was pale but peaceful. "He apologized," she said quietly. "He said you were right. He said kindness wins in the end." I didn't know if I believed him. But maybe it didn't matter. Some lessons come too late for the ones who need them most. Years have passed since that night outside the restaurant. Second Chances is thriving. The Dignity Dinner has expanded across 3 states. Sometimes I still get stopped on the street by people who recognize me, not for the viral story, but for the movement that followed. They say, "You're that woman who turned humiliation into hope." And I smile, because maybe that's exactly who I am now. If you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong, remember you do. You always did. The table is wide enough for all of us. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment. Tell me your story. And don't forget to follow for more stories like mine, stories about strength, dignity, and the quiet revenge that comes from standing tall.